That's Justin and Alyssa Jacobs. Alec and Philip Emma. Hannah Lilkin and their niece, Sasha Apolonsky. Together, they represent two generations of one family, the Zickermans, my family. My grandmother Riva passed away in May of 2012. She was one of the last of her generation. To her, family, and specifically this family, was everything. She was adopted into the Zickerman clan at a young age. She loved them greatly and treated her cousins as sisters and best friends. When she died, my mother and I decided to do something to honor her generation, a generation that started as a Yiddish-speaking family in pre-World War I Russia and ended with broken English in the US. This is their and our story. The story begins with Itzik and Pesha Zickerman. We don't know exactly where they lived, and only one photo still exists.
Nolik told me that great-grandpa Itzik was a Torah scholar and spent most of his time in a synagogue. I was really surprised. And they spoke Yiddish, mostly, very little Russian.
Я могу рассказать о бабушке Песи. Она была my grandmother. Любила меня очень. Принесла мне как-то в кровать козленка, чем привела маму мою в ужасно волнительное состояние.
Говорили так, что она ходила по детям, у кого было лучше, и говорила так: ты должен поделиться. Она брала и несла в другую семью. То есть она распределяла блага семьи.
Pesha and Itzik had 5 surviving children. Clara Zickerman Emma, Lieb or Lyova Zickerman, Efim Zickerman, Sima Zickerman Drachman, and their little brother Moisha, or Misha Zickerman. They were born between 1886 and 1895. The first anti-Tsarist revolution hit Russia in 1905. The first pogroms soon followed. Jews were driven out of small shtetls across the empire. Many fled to the west. Unfortunately, we missed the boat. Pesha, Itzik, and their kids only went as far as Odessa.
Эта семья держалась друг друга. Они один без другого не жили. Они были очень дружны.
At that time, Odessa was the largest southern city where Jews were allowed to live. Lyova, Clara, and Clara's husband, Simcha Emma, ran a vegetable stand at the Privoz, Odessa's famous market. Later, Lyova became a house painter, making him the family's first contractor.
They came from somewhere from the shtetl, so they lived in shtetl. That's what family would lived all together and very close and stuff. So that kind of a mentality left with them when they were living in Odessa.
The Zickerman children had little formal education, but Clara, the oldest, had something even more valuable.
The first word that comes in mind, wisdom. Just enormous brains and common sense with no education. But the foresight. When I am 6-year-old and I am forced against all the wills to go learn English as a second language, she sat me down. She said, someday English will become very handy. I didn't listen, of course. Didn't make me study any better. But the wisdom and ability to look in the future, to this date, is totally amazing me.
Бабушка командовала моими родителями, как меня купать, как меня кормить, а я кричал «Не моройс». По-еврейски это означает «не вынимайте меня из воды теплой». Я могу спеть песенку об Америке, которую пела моя бабушка. «In Amerika lebt dann Tote, schluf mein Sinenju. Wird nehmen Leben soller ins Einzizi». Это означает, что в Америке живет твой отец. Спи, мой мальчик, он заберет нас туда обязательно.
Clara married Simha Emma in 1907.
Дедушка Симон, он меня видел, я его не помню, потому что он погиб во время войны. Он был очень добрый человек, он всех внуков обцеловывал, обглаживал их. Он был очень слабовольный человек.
Clara and Simha had 3 children: Major Emma in 1908, Leah or Lisa Emma Schechter in 1910, and Dvoira or Dosia Emma Schechter in 1915.
Папа родился в Одессе, он родился, потом Лиза, потом Дося, все они родились на знаменитой Мясоедовской.
Мясоедовskaya was the heart of Odessa's poor Jewish quarter. It's also where Lyova lived with his family. Lyova married Betya Brick, a Polish Jew, in approximately 1914, and they had 2 children, Itzik or Izet Zickerman in 1922, and Esther, or Asya Zickerman Roydblad Yankovich Starik in 1916. I'll get to that later. Lyova's sister Sima married Gersh or Grisha Drachman in approximately 1915.
Сима была очень экспрессивная женщина, очень красивая и очень экспрессивная. Она могла верхняя ля брать, когда она начинала кричать.
In 1923, they adopted my grandmother, Riveka, or Riva Dondish-Lilkin, at the age of 3 when her parents died. Her mother was Bronya Brick Dondish, Betya Brick's sister. Yefim was ill, had no children, and this is the only photo left of him. Misha, the baby of the family, married Sonia Gershkovich in approximately 1922. They had 2 children, Ida Zickerman Rydnik in 1924 and Arnold or Nolik Zickerman in 1933. Confused yet? While everyone was busy getting married and having babies, there was a socialist revolution. Odessa was under the control of the White Army, then the French Army, then a Jewish gangster named Mishka Yaponchik, and finally the Red Army took over in 1920. It's not clear how this all touched the Zickerman family. It's likely Lyova and Yefim were drafted, but no record exists. Life after the revolution was much brighter for the family, but not without sacrifices. Religion was suppressed. They remained Jewish, but lost their Orthodox practices, and started speaking Russian more than Yiddish. At the same time, they all became Soviet citizens and enjoyed new and expanding equality. The uneducated siblings who moved from a shtetl to Odessa made sure that all of their kids got a college education. In the 20 years between the end of the revolution and the start of World War II, the family flourished.
Это был огромный кулак. Это были люди, которые не только любили, безусловно, любили, уважали, ценили друг друга, которые были готовы прийти на помощь в любой момент.
They also expanded. Major, the oldest of Clara's children, married Luba Margolina, and they had a son, Anatoly, or Tolik Emma, in 1938. Major was also the first to leave Odessa, moving first to Voroshilovgrad, then Yerevan, and after World War II, they ended up in Rostov, for which they earned the family nickname Rostovchане.
Маму приняли в семью потрясающе. Честно говоря, папе иногда доставалось, и крепко доставалось и от сестер, от Лизы и Доси, и от бабушки за маму. Они всегда были на ее стороне. То же самое произошло, кстати, и в моей жизни. Когда я привез первый раз мою жену Галю в Одессу, с тех пор вся моя родня была ее защитницей от меня.
Lisa married Lev, or Lyova Schechter, in 1930. They had 3 sons, Alek, who died as an infant, Marek or Mark Schechter in 1935, and after the war, Sam Schechter in 1946.
Вообще-то у нас получилось так, что был мальчик до меня, который умер, Алик. Поэтому надо мной трусились и опекали всячески.
Dosia married Semyon or Soma Schechter in 1938. Soma and Lyova Schechter were distant cousins who shared the same last name. That's why both of the sisters still had the same last name. Soon after, Dosia and Soma were sent to Białystok, Belarusia. Alla, or Alichka Schechter Fuchs, was born there in 1941, just months before the war. Lyova and Beta Zickerman's daughter Asya was a talented singer. In the late 1930s, she was a soloist in Leonid Utyosov's orchestra, the most famous orchestra of the time. Asya got to Moscow by marrying Leonid Roydblad in 1937. They soon divorced, but she stayed in Moscow. In 1941, before the start of the war, the Zickerman clan had swelled to 24 people. They were established in Odessa, owned a jewelry business, had good jobs, and my grandmother Riva was in medical school, on the path to becoming the first of many family doctors.
Внимание! Говорит Москва! Сегодня в 4 часа утра, без всякого объявления войны, германские вооруженные силы атаковали границы Советского Союза. Началась Великая Отечественная война советского народа против немецко-фашистских захватчиков.
The first to literally feel the start of the war were Dosia, Soma, and Klara in Białystok, right on the border with the Germans. Klara had gone to help Dosia with newborn Alla, who was 4 months old on June 22, 1941, when the bombs started to fall.
22 июня, когда начали бомбить, прямо упали бомбы на апартмент, где они жили. И они бежали с бабушкой и со мной. Их взяли на машину, машина попала в кювет, мама сидела со мной в кабине, а бабушка наверху. У бабушки была контузия, она упала сверху, машина перевернулась. А меня выбросили куда-то, и они не могли в пеленках, но ничего, мне ничего не было, я должна была жить.
Soma was almost immediately taken into the army. Mayor was in Moscow and was sent straight to Yerevan in Armenia to run a bread factory. His wife Luba and son Tolik were stranded in Voroshilовgrad.
И мы выскочили из Ворошиловграда последним товарником. Это вагоны для коров, для овец, для животных. Таким поездом мы уехали. По дороге бомбили. Долгий был путь, мы попали в Узбекистан.
It took Mayor until 1942 to find his family and bring them to Yerevan. In Odessa, the rest of the family was facing an advancing Nazi army. Liza saved most of them. She was the executive assistant to Odessa's health minister. Her boss signed off on this ship boarding pass for all of Liza's family and her husband's parents to leave the city. Pesya, Simcha, Liza, Lev Schechter, Marek, Sima, Grisha, and Riva left Odessa on that boat and eventually ended up in Tashkent, Uzbekistan.
Моя мама спасла не только нас, но и всех наших близких. Не допустила того, чтобы мы остались под гитлеровской петлей. И увезла всех. Нам потом этого простить никто не мог, что мы были в Ташкенте. Нас сотни тысяч, жизни не жалея, прошли бои, достойные легенд, чтоб после слышать, это кто, евреи? Они в тылу сражались за Ташкент.
Misha, Sonia, Nolik, and Ida left Odessa in a pickup truck provided by the wine factory where Misha worked. They also went to Tashkent. Lyova, Betya, and the Fim Zickerman chose to stay.
Они были простыми людьми с невысоким положением и, к сожалению, погибли в немецкой оккупации.
Lyova thought the Germans would be an improvement over Stalin. It was an easy but deadly mistake. It's assumed they died in the Odessa Holocaust, along with 90,000 other Jews, one of the worst mass murders during the war. Lyova and Betya's son Izya, a talented musician, was drafted into the army. He died in the first days of the war. Ася, who was in Moscow, was the only member of that branch to survive the war. During World War II, Tashkent was home to more than 150,000 Jewish evacuees. Among them were 15 members of the Zickerman clan. They all had to register with the local government, and those documents still exist. Liza's is written in her own handwriting and lists both Marik and Alla. Piesas shows she was born in 1867, and Misha, born in 1895, wrote he was born in 1890.
Нам сдали бывшую конюшню, большой дом, помещение для эвакуированных.
Конюшня была. Конюшня. Ты знаешь, но там, где лошади, это стейбл.
Seriously?
Yeah. Положили вот эти вот деревянные нары, и все спали вместе. Да.
К нам неплохо относились. Там была семья еврейская, как коренных жителей Узбекистана, которые тепло относились к нам.
А потом мама работала на хлебозаводе, им давали булочки, выдавали каждый день. И бабушка носила эти булочки на базар, меняла на черный хлеб. А Марик, он говорил: бабушка, а когда, если Алла не докушает, можно я докушаю? И сахар им выдавали немножко. И он мне говорил: Алла, дай мне немножко сахара. Вот так весело было у нас.
Мы влачили жалкое существование эвакуированных. Там погиб дед Симка. У него было плохо со слухом, и машина сбила его. Там же умерла бабушка Песя.
My grandmother Riva was only briefly in Tashkent. When they fled, she was in her 3rd year of medical school. In Tashkent, she finished an expedited course and graduated Dr. Dondish in 1942. She was immediately sent to a front-line hospital. Ася was recruited into a USO-style band, which traveled by train and entertained the troops. Despite many trips to the front, she escaped the war unharmed. When Odessa was liberated in April 1944, the family returned to a ruined city. They started the war with 24 members. By the end, 18 had survived. The survivors had to rebuild their lives from scratch. Clara and Sima returned to Odessa as the de facto heads of the family. The 2 sisters and their little brother Misha were all that was left of the original Zickermans. They wanted to live as close to each other as possible, so they moved into 2 apartments on the same street. Чечерина 32, apartment 4, and Чечерина 42, apartment 1.
Мы жили в обстановке, когда не было телефонов, приходилось общаться только физически, то есть приходить друг к другу. И мы это называли идти наверх или идти вниз. Когда приходили к нам, говорили: идем вниз, когда шли к ним в гости, говорили: идем наверх.
My childhood memories are that grandmother would prepare dinner, like in best restaurant, whoever likes what, all different kinds of French fries, the way me, Lev, my mom likes. And when the dinner was over, my grandmother would say, Linenyo, that was her name for me, we're going upstairs. She had to check on Clara. She had to make sure that her sister is okay today, and she wanted to spend time with her.
These years, just after the war, were also when the family turned into a matriarchal system.
The women's side was always prevailing although they were intelligent and smart enough to keep their husbands in great respect, and that's how the Jewish tradition went, when you always deliver your husband in the best light.
Dosia's husband Syoma spent the war as a tank driving instructor. After that, he drove any car as if it was an armored tank. When he returned to the family in 1946, it was to that home on Чечерина.
Папа был в армии. Папа приехал только в 1946 году, я его не знала. Позвонили в дверь, я пошла открывать. Я говорю, бабушка, там какой-то военный стоит. Я боялась открыть чужим. И мне было 5 лет тогда. И, в общем, бабушка увидела, что папа вернулся. Да.
That famous door is also where my grandmother Riva met my grandfather Mark, or Munya Lulkin.
He graduated from medical school in 1939 and was sent to work in Belostok, which was on the border with Poland. And my aunt Dosia, and her husband Semyon finished the college about the same time and were sent to work in Belostok. They've met there and they became friends. So then the Second World War started, and my father was in ghetto and then in the Soviet Army. He was a doctor in the Soviet Army. When he came back from war in 1946, he found Dvoira and Semyon, and he came to that famous apartment on Чечерина 32, which we called upstairs. And my mother was the one who opened the door because she was there at that time. And he told me he fell in love immediately.
My grandma told me she got very lucky in her choice of husbands. By 1946, Ася was back in Moscow. My grandmother's wedding was about to take place, and there was a new addition to the family. Lisa and Nova Schechter welcomed their youngest son, Sieva, or Sam. His bris was the last time the family openly celebrated their Jewish roots.
Sam was extremely special for my parents because he was born right before their wedding. They had a privilege to be his godmother and godfather.
Shortly after that, Stalin ushered in a new era of anti-Semitism into the Soviet Union. In 1948, the Jewish state of Israel was created. Stalin supported and lobbied for the state, but the Israeli leaders picked America's side in the quickly developing Cold War. Stalin took his anger out on the Jewish population under his control. After that, anti-Semitism was state-sponsored. When Pesya and Itzik Zickerman first moved to Odessa, they were Orthodox Jews. Under early communism, their children became conservative. Now, under Stalin, the younger members of the family became Jewish in name only. But Sima and Clara kept practicing their religion.
Jewish holidays, she would go in, light the candles, close the door, and cry. And it was mysterious time to me. Why are you crying? What's something? Because it's always associated with something being wrong. She says, just go. Okay, this is old mices. I mean, it's not for you. Just go away. And yet I would be curious because I would be concerned that what made her cry. And she would put a babushka, платочек на голову, and read from the book that I could not understand what it said. I mean, it was not a Russian language. This looked like something I never saw before. So I would ask, what is that? Just go away. That would be the answer.
While the late 40s and 50s were a time of anti-Semitism and suppression, they were also a time of growth and education. Despite strict quotas limiting Jews in universities, every member of the family got a college education. Lisa's job at the health ministry not only saved the family, but also helped get many members into medical school. My grandma Riva was the first to benefit from this connection. After her, Ida, Misha's daughter, also went to med school. And later, Alla, Doisha's daughter, also became a dentist.
My mother was a doctor, and she worked in a beautiful place, Sanatorium, Russia.
For those not inclined to be doctors, Liza's husband Lyova provided a second option. He was an executive at the Odessa State Academy of Refrigeration. So, Nolik, Marik, Sam, and later Vladimir Apolonsky all got degrees from this university. In addition to educating everyone, Liza and Lyova had another distinction. They had a Romeo and Juliet type love.
Моя тетя Лиза, Севина и Марика мама, она в молодости была очень симпатичной, очень изящной женщиной, имевшая очень многих поклонников. Так вот, достаточно было папе идти только по другой стороне улицы. Лиза шла по одной, а папа шел по другой. И уже к Лизе никто не подходил. Кстати, еще до свадьбы с Лизой папа подружился с Левой. Может быть, это была одна из причин, почему Лиза из многих своих поклонников выбрала именно Леву. О чем она, по-моему, никогда в жизни не пожалела, потому что это был достойнейший человек.
My dad contracted tuberculosis before the war, Second World War. Without her being around, he would probably not live. She always says that he is like a crystal vase that she has to carry all her life. And it was not in a complaining way. It was in a very proud way that my Lyovachka is with me. So, from many, many couples that I knew, and divorces was not common in the old country, they probably were exceptional, this relationship, exceptional. I never saw anything like that, with so much love and caring, both ways.
But their son's relationship wasn't as smooth.
Я пошел в Одесский холодильный институт. Институт инженеров по холоду. Занимался хорошо, не сходил с доски почета. Был, может быть, не самым способным, но достаточно известным человеком в этом институте.
Marek was always put an example. I went to the same school as he did, and all I heard from the teachers, "You are not your brother." I kind of figured that out by myself. When I went to the university, I graduated from the same university as he did. You are not your brother. So maybe between sisters would be a lot more resentment. I didn't resent it that much. I just got sick and tired of listening to this statement over again. And it was repeated by different people, but the words were the same. I mean, by different people not knowing each other. That's why I got the hell out of Odessa and moved to St. Petersburg. So people quit bugging me with this stuff.
While Marik and Sam were busy growing in separate directions, their cousin Tolik was causing his own trouble. He lived in Rostov and would come to visit every summer.
Ну, я уже не помню, был это первый или второй раз, я только помню большую головную боль, которую я доставлял всем своим родственникам. Потому что я исчезал, я куда-то там девался, я бегал на танцы. Ну, в общем, я вел себя не так, как было принято среди одесской детворы.
Толик очень любил Одессу, и он очень любил гулять. И потом он уже был постарше, там были танцы в домоходах вечером, и он любил ходить. А там такая пустыня вечером, темно.
Каждый вечер стояли так. Бабушка стояла у калитки, дальше стояла Тося, Лиза, так, эстафета, как морская эстафета, Сема и Лева. И раздавался голос: «Он идет!» И все, по цепочке, все. Тогда бабушка могла спокойно идти спать.
Он выслушивал, конечно, соответствующий, но на следующий день было то же самое.
Я был таким позором семьи, честно говоря. Вот, но каждый выполнял, так сказать, свое. Я занимался своим делом, веселился, как я хотел. Марик занимался тем, что он следил за мной и докладывал. Марик, что было, то было.
Just like in America, the 1950s in Odessa were all about weddings and the baby boom. After the war, my grandparents were the first to get married in 1946. Their wedding celebration took place in the same apartment where they met.
В нашей квартире было, по-моему, 5 или 6 свадеб, потому что была большая квартира. Все свадьбы проходили у нас в квартире. И свадьба была Ривы и Муни у нас в квартире. Это я помню.
Their son Lyova, or Lev Lilkin, was born in 1950, and daughter Lena, my mom, came along in 1960. Doisa and Syoma also expanded their family. They added son Gary Schechter in 1950, just a few months before my uncle Lev.
Гарик старше меня аж на 2 месяца, так что мы родились почти в одно время. Я помню, например, что даже когда мы готовились в институт, мы ходили к одним и тем же учителям, вместе занимались. И главное, что эта дружба продолжается и сегодня.
After that, Ida, Misha's daughter, married Yosef, or Osik Rydnik, in 1953 and moved to Riga. Daughter Polina, or Lena Rydnik, was born in 1955. Misha and Sonia moved to Riga to be close to their first grandchild, making them the Rizhani branch, later renamed New York.
My cousin Polina, Lena, she was always very fashionable. She was open-minded. She spoke English. I looked at her like, wow, that's how I want to be. But she didn't care much about me. She was with Lev and Gary most of the time. So I just looked at her wishing, wow, she's awesome.
Misha's son Nolik got married to Ida Shankman in 1956. Their son Alex Zickerman, the only one with the original last name, was born in 1960. Liza's son Marek married Irina Apolonsky in 1957. Their son Vladimir, born in 1959, was given her last name, Apolonsky, to escape the stigma of a Jewish name. Next was Doisa's daughter Alla, who married Izya, or Israel Fuchs, in 1961, and had son Victor, or Vitya Fuchs, in 1963. Theirs was the last family wedding to take place in that huge apartment in Chicherina 32.
Preparation, putting the tables together and plates. I loved doing it. Putting forks on the left and a knife on the right. I had to think about it for a minute. I mean, yes, we loved it. We were constantly counting the people. I mean, it's coming, everybody's coming, everybody showed up. There was no need to RSVP. Everybody would show up. It was fun.
In addition to the expansion happening in Odessa, Mayor's family in Rostov was also growing. Tolik Emma married Galina, or Galia Tolchinsky, in 1961, and they had 2 sons, Kenneth, or Kotik Emma, in 1962, and eventually Maxim, or Max Emma, in 1974. Their wedding was a huge family event. The entire Odessa contingent traveled to Rostov. By then, Mayor had established himself in the city and wanted to throw a big party.
Кстати, знакомство Асиного мужа Бори со всей семьей произошло именно у нас в Ростове, на нашей свадьбе в 1961 году. Ася привезла Борю представить всей семье. Все жили на квартире моих родителей. В квартире, большая квартира. И хотя распределили как бы всех по знакомым, но никто не хотел никуда уходить, и все спали в повалку, кто где мог. На полу, и вот утром сцены, когда проснулись, там, в ночных рубашках, в трусах, А Боря все это фотографировал. И все кричали, что Боря мерзавец, он компрометирует всю семью.
Borya was Asa's third and final husband. Before him, she married Yasha Yankovich in the 1940s. Yasha died in 1959. In 1961, she married Borya Starik, making her Asa Zickerman Roydblatt Yankovich Starik, and a bit of a trailblazer for her time. Between 1945 and 1963, with new spouses and children, the Zickerman clan swelled from 18 to 33. While Clara and Sima watched their kids, Liza, Lyova, my grandparents Riva and Munya, and Dosia and Syoma worked.
The work ethics of my parents was incredible, you know. I remember my mom, I still call her heroic woman. You know. She worked full-time and raising kids and taking care of the family at the same time.
Самое интересное в папиной биографии, что у него всю жизнь была одна должность – главный инженер. По профессии папа был хлебник. Он занимался самым главным и, пожалуй, самым беспокойным делом. Он обеспечивал хлебом народ.
They also made sure their children received the best possible education.
The most important thing in my mom's life was to give her children and grandchildren everything she could give them. And education was the first one, which was like must for my mother. She expected excellence, and not only in education, in life.
Мама была вовлечена во все вопросы моего образования. Она очень часто приходила в школу. Она даже выдала замуж 2 из моих учителей в школе. Настолько близко она была вовлечена во всю деятельность, во все, что было связано с моим образованием.
My mom was very strict with kids, with us, and she always were trying to preempt me to get in trouble. So even if before I get in trouble, she was already considering that I'm gonna get in trouble because, you know, she would go to school and talk to my teachers and they would complain. Somebody would complain that I talk too much or something like that.
This generation, Dosia, Liza, Riva, Asa, and their husbands, became something more than just family. They became friends. When they weren't working, they were always together.
It's more than just blood alone. It's genuine sharing of each other's life interests, being. That's probably soulmates, is probably the best description I can give you.
They also went to great lengths to help and support each other, even eating mass amounts of cottage cheese because of Lyova's diet needs.
The thing he couldn't live without was a cottage cheese. So doesn't matter what, he had to have his cottage cheese. It wasn't easy, it's probably funny for you, but it wasn't easy to go buy cottage cheese or even to make it at home. So my mom, Dosia and Liza had several suppliers, illegal suppliers of cottage cheese. The stories of cottage cheese were constant. Dosia called my mom saying, Lev needs cottage cheese. They brought 3 kilos. We need to take all of this. And my mom would say, Dosia, I have 2 kilos too for them. So you want it or you don't. You buy it because Lev has to have it. And he doesn't need that much because it would not be fresh later on. So many of us, and some even know, grew up hating cottage cheese because we always had it and everything was made of cottage cheese in my house.
Sunday where the whole family got together for breakfast.
There was so much laugh at the table. We would not get up until 11:30. The breakfast will continue, just roll over and the stories. And everybody would pick on each other in a kind way, but laughing just nonstop.
So who was the biggest smart aleck? You said everyone would just make fun of each other.
Sema.
Soma, Dosi's husband, who was very funny, when they would come to the summer house, he first started checking what is he gonna have for lunch, who brought what. And when it was 3 same dishes, he would mix them together so they would not have any comparison who is better cook. It's all mixed.
In Odessa, summers were spent by the Black Sea. Liza and Lyova were the first to get a dacha, or summer house. It was called Dacha Kovalevskого. This is where everyone spent weekends in summer.
Дача нависала над морем. Ночью была лунная дорожка, и пели, анекдоты рассказывали. Я даже составил песенку, которая называлась вместо «Подмосковные вечера» «Ковалевского вечера». Море движется и не движется, все из лунного серебра. Песня Асеньки здесь услышится в эти дивные вечера.
А мой папа сидел и говорил: о, черные. Это значит, кто-то уже шел, новые. Да. И все приезжали с продуктами, и накрывали столы, и было очень весело.
There was no light, electrical light, so it was candles. A lot of older generation people in Russia were wearing fake teeth. Those fake teeth would be for overnight put in a cup or a glass, and they would be there until the morning. One night, when Sima was spending night over there, she thought she put a teeth in a cup, and then she cannot find the teeth. So she gathered all of us, kids, and there is a hill with a lot of weeds. Kids, all of you, go and by hand, in the total dark, go touch and feel, I lost my teeth, and the life stops. We were there probably for a good 30-40 minutes, crawling in the weeds. I mean, it's just crazy. And all of a sudden, there is a loud laugh coming from upstairs. Дети, идите сюда! So we all came back. She says, I found my teeth. I said, where were they? In my mouth. We were there for 40 minutes looking for this stuff. If you think I am sometimes not looking for my glasses, wearing glasses, it happens to me now too.
Arnold, my uncle Nolik, was the first one with the automobile in our family. He had this Zaporozhets, the cheapest one, this small car. He would come to these gatherings in this car, and it was always big excitement for my mom, Dosi, and Lisa, because they didn't want to walk to the beach. It was many steps there. They would proudly go to his car, sit in the car, and then the best part was when Nolik would walk out of a driver's seat watching if this car is still moving or it's already on the ground, because they were so much weight and the car was so little.
The other summertime entertainment was Ася. Every year she would come and spend the summer in Odessa.
She was such a joy. Most of the time very upbeat in public, like a typical actress would be, and would tear up with stuff when there is nobody around, only sisters or her cousins.
Ася never had any children, so instead she spoiled everyone else's.
I'm sure my cousins remember the first floating mattress they brought. It was made in Czechoslovakia, and they brought it to Odessa, and It was expensive and it was new and it was precious for them, but they gave it to their nieces and nephews. Interesting thing that they came with the special pieces to fix it. Borya already knew that we will break it, so he came prepared.
The younger generation, Sam, Gary, Lev, my mom Lena, Vladimir, Sasha, Ken, and sometimes Victor, were also friends.
I was friends with my many cousins. I was a classmate of Alex Zickerman. We were in the same class because we were the same age, and we were pretty close at that time. I was always close with Vladimir, with Volodya. We grew up together and our summers were together, and my memories of Volodya, he always protected me on the beach. And the celebrity cousin was Kian. When Kian was coming to Odessa, it was like a holidays coming.
Витя, это было следующее поколение, и он всегда старался, насколько возможно, проводить время с нами. Я помню, что один раз мы пошли ловить рыбу и на лодке, и качало были волны. Витя стал бледный, как полотно. Ему было очень плохо. Он лег на дно лодки, и мы с Гариком спрашивали у Витя, как ты себя чувствуешь? Он сказал, все нормально, все хорошо, я окей. Больше всего он боялся, что мы вернем его на берег и высадим.
Lev and Gary, they were inseparable, but once, I remember, was a special day in my life. They took me to the soccer game. The stadium was packed, and we were sitting on a really tiny bench there. I was in between of my brother and my cousin. They were protecting me from a crowd. My absolutely wonderful, classy, straight-A students, perfect brother and cousin, always well-mannered. And what I've seen there, they were jumping, screaming, cussing, spitting. I was horrified. Oh my God.
The 70s started off tragically for the family. Sima died in her home on Chicherina on January 1st, 1970.
She was extremely wise woman, even though she told me later that she had only 4 grades of education. But she was very, very wise, and she was kind, but she was very strong, and she was a woman of a very strong opinions. And she would let everyone know if she is not satisfied or she thought they are not doing right.
Mayor, Clara's son, died of a heart attack in Rostov on April 15th, 1971. He was only 63.
Папа был очень интересный человек. В том плане, у него не было никакого музыкального образования, но это был такой горячий любитель музыки, причем музыки абсолютно разносторонней. Это и джаз, это и песни, это и лирика, это и оперная музыка, это симфоническая музыка. Любимая опера у папы была «Аида», которую только на сцене он слушал более 100 раз на сцене.
Clara took her son's death very hard and became bedridden soon after. She died 8 months later, on January 10th, 1972.
She was a peacemaker in the family. She loved grandkids. And when Victor, our son, was born, she just was crazy about him.
Clara and Sima's baby brother Misha, the last of the original Zickermans who came to Odessa, died in Riga in the winter of 1973. These losses ushered in a new era. Lisa, Dosia, and Riva, now in their 50s and 60s, started to take over the role of grandmother and peacekeeper.
This is probably our important family tradition. We are family. That's what women in our family in different generations were giving to each other like a torch, like an Olympic light.
Sam, always in a hurry, got married to Elena or Lala Sitnikova at the age of 19 in 1966. But they waited to have children. Son Alex was born in 1974, and daughter Carol was born in America in 1980. In the late 70s, there was a wedding every year. My uncle Lev married Alla Kreisman in 1977. Their wedding was a big family event, the first one to be filmed. Son Vadim, or Dean, was born in 1978, and Matthew, or Matt, or Peanut, was born in America more than a decade later, in 1990. Next to get married was Gary. He married Zhenya, or Jean Gelfer, in 1978. Son Boris, or Bobby, was born in 1980, and daughter Sarah in 1985. In Riga, Paulina married Roman Izraelsky in 1979. He took her last name of Rydnik. Daughter Milena Rydnik was born in 1981. My mom Lena married my dad Boris Barshek in the winter of 1980. I was born soon after, in September of 1980. Vladimir Apolonsky married Marina Kuznetsova in the summer of 1980. They had son Misha, or Michael, in 1981. There was a short break in weddings, and then Sasha Zickerman married Darina Kravitz in 1986. They had son Alan Zickerman, the last to have the original last name, in San Francisco in 1993. Meanwhile, Vladimir divorced his first wife, and in 1987 married Irina Britva. Alyosha, or Alex, was born in 1988. Ken Emma followed in Asa's singing and marital footsteps. He married for the first time in the early 80s, and hopefully the last time in 2012, to Natasha Peterson. He had two daughters, Jane Emma, born in Rostov in 1988, and Danielle Emma, born in San Diego in 1998. In the 70s and 80s, anti-Semitism was again on the rise. Israel's victory in the Six-Day War was a great source of pride for Soviet Jews. Their happiness at the victory of an enemy was seen as betrayal.
Я четко помню, как какой-то жлоб сказал маме, что вы здесь делаете, ваше место в Израиле.
А потом на улице мне кричали «жидовская морда». Когда я стояла за молоком, почему ты еще не уехала из Израиля, у нас будет больше молока, если ты уедешь. Так они говорили.
Impatient as always, Sam and his family were the first to leave the Soviet Union. He left with Lala and Alex in early 1977.
The most extreme action I ever took in my life probably was coming to the United States, cutting off all the ties with the Soviet Union, and leaving my parents alive over there, knowing I will never see them again. And to this date, I remember in Pulkovo airport in Leningrad, my dad standing there with his scarf inside the fur hat, holding it like that and waving to me. That was hard.
That was the last time he saw his father. Lyova died in 1979.
It's interesting the sacrifice that parents make when they say leave because there is something better on the other side. And they did it, and I'm grateful for their sacrifice.
Alla, Isa, and Victor left just 7 months after Sam.
Сан-Диего был закрытый город. Так как я была шехтер, я шла как родная сестра Севина. И поэтому мы попали сюда, в Сан-Диего. И мы приехали, они еще были очень сырые. Они только 7 месяцев до нас приехали. У Севы был вот так палец, вот такой в 2 раза толще, он чертежами, он чертежником работал. И мы приехали, они, конечно, нас встретили, и он говорит: Алла, ты увидишь, я буду миллионером. Он мне тогда сказал, я говорю, откуда? Он говорит, ты увидишь. И мы пошли в Химар тогда, и он говорит, Алла, ты увидишь, пройдет пару лет, и в Химар даже не зайдешь, тебе будет стыдно войти. Но я так смотрела на него, потому что мы пошли в Химар, я была в диком восторге, что я там увидела после Одессы. Так что вот так было.
In 1979, Dosia, Syoma, Gary, and Jean left Odessa for San Diego. By the time they arrived, Bobby was also on the way.
I told Jean that this is our new life, a new country, and we need to get used to it as quick as possible, and faster we get used to this new life, better off we're gonna be. But the cultural shock was incredible. My parents, I think they were okay because, 6 months after we came, Bobby was born, and my parents were busy taking care of him because we both got jobs and stuff. When Bobby was a baby in a crib, my dad was singing revolutionary songs to him. Под долинами, по взгорьям and stuff like that. An apartment on 56th Street. Alla was studying to become a dentist, so she was all into that. It took her several times to pass the board, and everybody was very worried about that. And my mom taught Bobby to say, she would ask him, Bobby, what do we need? Bobby would say, license.
Like all Jewish grandmas, Dosia thought food was paramount, and she spent hours feeding Bobby.
У нас в Советском Союзе надо было, чтобы дети были толстые. Это было очень важно. Боря, он не хотел, они заставляли его кушать. Значит, мы заходим, сидят, папа там какие-то фокусы делает, чтобы он кушал. В это время Изя, я зашла, мама говорит, Дося говорит, Изя, дай свои часы, и молоток лежит, пускай он ударит. Он тогда, мы пару ложек ему всунем.
She also took care of her older grandson, Victor. But taking care of a teenager took more than food and shiny toys.
Дося забрала его к себе. Он жил у них. Но уже была машина, он любил гулять. И, конечно, он выходил, когда он хотел. Но она волновалась. Так для того, чтобы не пропустить момент, когда он придет, она ложилась в его кровать. В его кровать. Он приходил в его кровать, он говорит, Дося, чего ты отвлекла? Я хотела посмотреть, в котором часу ты пришел.
For the first time since World War II, Dosia was separated from Lisa and my grandmother Riva. They tried to bridge the distance with constant letters.
Dosia wrote to my mom and Lisa every little detail. We were almost at the delivery with Jean when Bobby was born.
When Perestroika started in 1985, it became possible for those who left to come back and visit Odessa. They weren't sure what would happen when they returned. Dosia went first to test the waters. She had been gone from Odessa, the city of her birth, for more than 7 years.
And she was crying all the time, and I was wondering why is she crying, and later on I knew she was crying because she was thinking we are living so badly. We didn't feel that it was so terrible.
После того, как Дося приехала из Советского Союза, она сказала, я сделаю все, они должны сюда приехать. Все. Потому что там жизнь ужасная.
After Dosia, the next to visit were Sam and his son Alex. Before Odessa, they stopped in Moscow to visit Ася. They took them to a store open only to foreign tourists.
So we went to this store, and by Soviet standards, there was enormous variety of different stuff. I said, what do you want? I mean, let's buy it all. They said, no, but if we can get a little bit of olive oil. I said, what? We just want a little bit of olive oil. I said, look how much of this stuff is here. No, but we just want olive oil. So there was a canister of 5 liters, which is almost 1.5 gallons of olive oil.
So here I am taking this thing and proudly walking out of the store with olive oil. And Boris said, I'm the happiest person in the world. And Asya said, that's all I ever wanted. I love oil.
And incidentally, when we were leaving Soviet Union, and when the pilot said we just crossed the border line between Finland and Soviet Union, I remember Alex loudly screamed on the whole plane, Russia sucks!
Alex's feelings were echoed by the rest of the family. In 1988, we left Odessa. My grandmother Riva, Grandpa Munya, my mom Lena and my dad, my uncle Lev, and Alla and Dean flew from Moscow to Vienna, then Italy, and finally San Diego. Our initial happiness was short-lived. My grandfather Munya died in March of 1989, just 3 months after we got here. He was the first to be buried in America.
My father was a very special person, and I always thought that my mom was the strong one and opinionated one, and she ruled our family. But actually it's my father who gave her the strength and who gave her ability to do what she was doing for us kids and for you grandkids.
The Rostov contingent left soon after us. Ken and his family came in 1989. Luba, Tolik, Galia, and Max followed in 1993. Luba died just a few months later. Around the same time, the family in Riga moved to New York. And Nolik, Ida, Sasha, and Dorina went to San Francisco to Dorina's family. In 1993, Liza died in Odessa.
Мама – это был мой добрый гений. Она любила меня беззаветно и преданно, так как может любить еврейская мать, Аида Шимомы.
What I still remember to this date, she had incredibly soft hands. And to this date, sometimes on my skin I feel her touch. Hard to explain, I don't know without getting mystical about it, but to this date I feel it.
Asya's husband Borya died in 1992, leaving her all alone in Moscow. In 1994, she finally agreed to leave the capital city of her dreams and come to San Diego. She lived here happily for over a decade and died here in 2011.
Музыка для меня значит очень много в жизни, и нам было с Асей о чем поговорить, иногда там немножко попеть вместе, что она любила, и еще и здесь у нас было несколько романсов, которые мы пели вместе с ней на 2 голоса, и она страшно это обожала, и чудесно у нее получалось, и она сама аккомпанировала.
Marik and Irina came to San Diego in 1997. Volodya and his family followed in 1998. They were the last. It took her 12 years, but Dosia finally got everyone out. The move to America forced everyone to start from scratch again. It brought with it new challenges and opportunities, but also brought back a connection to religion. It meant all the kids could again have Jewish educations and bar and bat mitzvahs. For many people, including my mother, it was also the first time they could actually go to a synagogue. even if they held the prayer books upside down.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar b'nevim tovim v'ratzav v'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai haboher b'Torah u'Yisrael.
The most valuable thing our family members brought to America was their education. They also tried to prepare. Odessa told everyone to take English and driving lessons. In San Diego, she also forced Soma to learn to drive.
Это было так интересно. Витя его учил водить машину, и как-то они поехали сдавать. А папа мой так сидел, как за танком. Он не двигался вот так, он не смотрел никуда. Вот так он водил машину. Но он еще плохо умел. А который принимал экзамен, он спрашивает: Витя, вы уверены, что он хочет сдавать? Он говорит: ну, я не уверен, но надо, чтобы он сдал. Дося настаивала. Дося настаивала, чтобы он сдал водить, потому что ей надо было всюду быть.
But when she couldn't go in person, there was always the phone.
Dosia was always on the phone, and my mom too. Here in America, the most important part in their apartment was the phone. That was a line to each other and to the world. And how much would I give now to be able to call my Aunt Dosia and hear, "Oh, Linочка, I need you so much. You just knew you have to call me. Doesn't matter when I'm calling." The only thing she would tell me, just remember, if Alla, Gary, or Victor will call, I'll tell you, I'll switch. But I need you, we can talk until they'll call. And she would ask me everything about my life. I had to give her the smallest details, and she would give me information about everybody else. Everything important was what was in the life of my cousins at that time. I could know either from Dosia or from my mom, because they already talked 5 times before that on the phone this day. So how do you call it? You had a special name for this.
The Dosia Riva hotline was in full force in the 90s. But despite their best efforts, it became harder and harder to corral their big family. The only time everyone would get together would be bar, bat mitzvahs, and weddings. Maybe that's why these events took on a new level of grandeur and importance. Victor was the first to get married here. He married Sveta, or Lana Bronstein, in 1991. Son Lawrence, or Ladik, was born in 1993, and daughter Elizabeth, or Lizzie, was born in Las Vegas in 1998. All the children born in the US or brought here at a young age graduated from major universities, making them the 3rd and 4th generation to do so. When Grandma Riva came to my college graduation in DC in 2002, she quickly noticed that some people, the graduate students, had fancy hoods and nicer robes. Never one to be happy with good enough. She asked why I didn't have one, and immediately said I needed a capuchonchik. Here you go, Grandma. In 2002, Max Emma married Elena, or Lena Rosenfeld. Son Alec was born in 2005, and Philip, or Fila, in 2010. In 2004, Carol married Eric Jacobs. Son Justin was born in 2007, and daughter Elisa in 2010.
All right, Justin, tell me, what is a family?
A group of people that all live in the same house.
Also in 2003, Soma passed away.
I remember he would say, "Шампанское не водка, много не выпьешь." I mean, he loved to tell jokes and to play jokes and stuff, and it was when we were together with a family, with a bigger family, he would make a lot of fun.
Doся died fairly soon after, in December of 2005.
She made her life to know. She taught her kids and her grandchildren to report every event, every day, in details. Victor had to call with bid results to her before he would probably let people in the company know.
У нее была утром пятиминутка. Звонил Гарик и Витя. А потом она мне звонила и говорила. Я уже поговорила с Витей, я все новости знаете, могу сообщить.
Despite the losses, life continued. In 2006, Dean married Marlene Moffat. They had daughter Hannah in 2011. And son Asa, currently the youngest member of the family, in 2012. In New York, Milena married Roman Gochban in 2007. Misha Polonsky married Alyona Kanyaeva in 2009. And they had daughter Sasha in 2010. Technically, the oldest member of the family's 7th generation. 2010, just like 1980, was a very productive year for babies. We had 4. In this picture, Carol, Marlene, and Alyona are all pregnant, and Lena gave birth to Philip just a few months earlier. 2010 was also the year I got married. I married Jonathan Gerard. I'm sure I made as good a choice as my grandma. And last, but not least, Bobby Schechter married Morgan Maltzman in August of 2012.
Дося говорила так: раз это наше, это самое лучшее. Все, которые к нам приходят, раз она уже в нашей семье, это самое лучшее, что есть.
My grandmother Riva died just a few months before Bobby's wedding, on May 10th, 2012.
Very important for her was to let me know if I'm right or wrong, and I had to be right. And by right, she meant I had to have integrity, loyalty to my family, and love to my brother, to my cousins, to all my family. And she never asked for love to my mother, but I really loved her. And I maybe didn't realize it as much when she was alive, like I realize it now, that I loved her very, very much.
Ida in New York and her brother Nolik in San Francisco are the only ones left of that generation. Along with their generation, we're also losing a sense of unity and friendship that they worked so hard to build.
как мы сейчас дружим. Не так, как дружили наши родители. Совсем не так, как дружили. Так, на большие события мы собираемся, конечно. Конечно. Но тоже не всегда. Кто-то не может, кто-то не хочет, кого-то не приглашают. По-разному складывается жизнь. К сожалению. Не так. Мы не такие близкие, как там были. Не такие. Я думаю, что ты, как это говорят, там они переворачиваются, если бы они увидели, что тут происходит.
It's one thing to live one block away from each other, and in Soviet Union we were not probably as busy. Family meant more, a lot. And then things kind of got stretched, and seams became wider, and it's not the same.
Depending on a moment, that's when you need a family. That's when you need somebody who would really cry with you or laugh with you, would be happy for you, would be sad if you are sad. It's so important to have people you know, people who are familiar to you, somebody who you know really cares.
Today, the Tickerman clan has 56 members spanning 5 generations. The youngest, Asa, was born in October of 2012. His bris was held without any fears or concerns of retribution. Just like my grandparents did for Sam in 1946, my husband and I had the honor of bringing him into the room. I'm somewhat responsible for him. At some point, I can tell him about Asa's singing, Doisa's wisdom, or Riva's generosity. But I'm not sure an American kid from Southern California will really get it. Unless he still feels like a part of this big family. My family.
Mazel tov. Amen. Mazel tov. Cinnamon tov. Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Cinnamon tov. Cinnamon tov. Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Cinnamon tov. Cinnamon tov. Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Cinnamon tov. Yeah.